the International Shorebird Survey. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about my little corner of the birding world, the shorebirding world. And I'm going to start broad and then we'll narrow it down. So we're going to start. I should first say, can everybody see my screen? That's good. And everybody can hear me? That's good. All right, no complaints? All right, let's get going. So I wanted to talk a little bit about shorebirds first. What are shorebirds? Why are they important? And why are they such a large component of Manomet's work? So this is me. In the very center of the screen, you can see a very small Lisa Schibley, that's me. And I am on Manomet National Wildlife Refuge, which is some islands off of the coast of Cape Cod. And I am counting shorebirds. This was actually last Wednesday, so only, not yesterday, it was Tuesday, so 2 days ago. And we are very lucky in that we have a lot of shorebirds that hang out on Massachusetts shores, but they don't spend the winter here, or at least not as many. They head south. And some of them are going to end up in Florida. So what makes a shorebird a shorebird? Shorebirds are closely related to gulls, and they're all in the Chadriformis order. And the shorebirds, generally, we think of them as the sandpipers, the plovers, the oyster catchers, avocets, phalaropes. There are 220 species of shorebirds across the globe, and about 84 of them occur in the Western Hemisphere in the Americas. And those are the ones that ISS is interested in. And some people think of shorebirds as any bird by the shore, but shorebird is actually not a really great name for the birds that my Manomet and my program studies. A shorebird can be really in any open land. They love beaches, they love mudflats, but they also love grasslands and tundra, even flooded agricultural areas. And some people think that shorebirds are actually herons and egrets are included in shorebirds, but for us, we think of those as shorebirds, and then the heron and the egrets, we think of those as waders, which is even more confusing because if you are a shorebird scientist in Europe, what you study is actually called waders. So there is a lot of confusion about what is a shorebird. But if you look at some of the unique characteristics that they have, you are interested in, they have a relatively long bill, an upright stance, long legs, and they're birds of open areas, and that's one of the things that connects them all. And here are just a few examples of some shorebirds in Florida. And we're going to be talking about some of these more in depth later, but Florida is, and again, we'll talk about this later, one of the linchpins of the East Coast and the Central Flyways. And the shorebirds that you have moving through your part of the world, there's a wide variety and they're amazing. And I'm really excited. This is actually my first recruiting webinar in Florida, and I'm just so excited to talk to you all about ISS. So why are shorebirds amazing? And so this one slide, it actually could easily be 4 presentations because there's so much about shorebirds that are just incredible. Shorebirds migrate. So they are some of the most amazing migrators on the planet. And they go from some of the species go from the very north reaches of the Arctic all the way down to the southern tip of Argentina. And one of the world record holders is actually a bar-tailed godwit. And it records 8,425 miles in 11 days. They had a geotag on it, so they knew exactly where it went. And there are other birds that migrate that far, like the Arctic tern goes from the Arctic to the Antarctic. But the thing about the Arctic tern is it can rest. It can sit on the water, it can eat a fish, it can have a little snooze. These shorebirds, they often, the ones that cross the ocean, they don't rest. This is 11 days nonstop flight. Shorebirds are amazing. And one of the reasons that they can do that is because they actually put on like twice their body weight. They fatten up, they weigh twice as much as they want, and they spend those 11 days just burning the calories. Like, I wish I could figure out how to burn calories like that. I wouldn't mind going down that much. And so the next thing is, and like I said, each one of these things someone could talk for an hour about because it's so complex. Shorebirds, they collect in these large groups and they have these patterns of flying that's mesmerizing, whether they're moving from one place to another or they're trying to evade predators. It's if you've seen any of the videos out of Canada, the Bay of Fundy, or on the big flats of the Pacific Northwest, there's just thousands of shorebirds moving in concert. They're really cool to watch. I suggest you look them up on YouTube if you haven't seen them. They have cool distraction displays. They have courtship displays. If you've ever seen a woodcock is a kind of a shorebird, actually. A lot of people don't think of it as shorebirds, but it is. And they have these really cool, they circle up into the air and have the twittering. And imagine going to the Arctic and there's like 5 or 6 different kinds of shorebirds that have displays that are somewhat related to the woodcock displays, like really cool. And they have, really cool physical characteristics, just like putting on the weight. They have something called rhynchokinesis, which is their long bills. It actually moves. So when they're probing into the ground, they can move the tips of their bills to capture prey, which is actually one of the coolest things I think about shorebirds. And so, we all love birds. Birds are amazing, but there's something about the shorebird order that's just like everything that you love about birds, shorebirds have to this amazing extent. And so why study shorebirds other than the fact that they're cool? Well, they're very excellent indicators of healthy ecosystems. So the places that they love, whether those places are healthy or not, will change whether shorebirds use them or not. And so that is a really great indicator of they're healthy. They're super migrants. So not only will a shorebird tell us something about a beach in Florida, but they'll also tell us about what's happening in the Arctic and also what's happening in a mangrove swamp in Brazil. So they tell us information about all of these wide-ranging places. And then they connect us. I mean, there are people in all of these wide-ranging places. So shorebirds connect us to the people that maybe live down in South America, or they connect you and me. Shorebirds connect people across these spaces in an incredible way. One of the things about shorebirds that make them complicated is that they love the places that we love. Everybody loves the beach. Shorebirds love the beach. We want to spend our time on the beach. We want to build houses on the beach. We want to, spend lots of quality time on the beach. I love the beach. The problem is the shorebirds need the beach too. So all of this relationship is complicated. It makes it, again, important to study. And because of all of this, population trends for shorebirds are down, and we'll talk about that later. But we need to study the shorebirds because of that. We need to understand what's going on, what are the threats. And then the most important reason to study shorebirds is because they're cute as the buttons. The folks in Florida have some of the cutest little shorebird, the Wilson's plovers and the snowy plovers and little fuzzball with toothpicks. And We have piping plovers up where I am, and they're really cute. This is a piping plover. So Manomet, part of Manomet study is a shorebird study research group. But who is Manomet? Most folks in Florida probably have never heard of Manomet because we started up in Massachusetts. So Manomet uses science and collaboration to strengthen bird migration routes, coastal ecosystems, working lands and seas across the Western Hemisphere. And this is just a little map with some of our projects. And I know you're not really going to be able to read all this. It's just a graphic that I didn't even put this one together. I stole it from someone. But it just kind of gives you a sense of what kind of research Manomet does across the Western Hemisphere. A big part of our research is Arctic shorebird work. And so we have a team of scientists ever since 2001 that goes up to the Arctic and does intensive surveys to quantify breeding bird populations. And we are most interested in identifying the limiting factors to successful nesting. I'm gonna kind of skip over some of this just because I have a lot to get to, but if anybody has any questions about the work that Manomet does, I am happy to go back to slides and talk about it. Because there is a lot, again, a lot of stuff. And I actually don't do this work. This isn't part of what I do. I do the International Shorebird Survey, but I still should be happy to answer any questions about it if I can. And so Manomet also works in South America. We have this equal staff, North America and South America, Latin America, because again, the shorebirds that we are interested in, the migratory shorebirds, are not just, living on the East Coast of the United States. They're the ones that go from the Arctic to the United States, all the way down to South America. So we have staff in South America that are working on understanding what their threats are. And it's interesting because most of the staff down in South America are working on projects that have to do with resource-based industries. The spaces that the shorebirds use in South America are often resource extraction spaces. So shrimp farming and cattle ranches and salt producers all have relationships to shorebirds, and we need to study and understand them and understand how they can still be successful in the businesses that they need, while also not being too much of a threat of shorebirds. And so there's a lot of work that Manomet does down there. And we also do a lot of surveys for some unknown endemics. So the Magellanic plover that you could see, which is one of the cutest shorebirds in the whole world, the tuna plover and the seed snipes, all those cool shorebirds that don't get up here. We have a lot of work understanding their populations as well. So where does the International Shorebird Survey fit in all of this? One of the challenges of all of the work that Manomet does, and I've been scribing and other shorebird scientists do, is that it's difficult to access a lot of these spaces. So it's an endeavor to get people up to the Arctic, and there's a lot of areas that are important to shorebirds in South America that are in the middle of mangrove swamps, and it's difficult to get folks there. And in order to count shorebirds, in order to understand what's happening with populations, that's usually where people go to count things, where they're breeding or where they're wintering, because that's where they kind of collect. The breeding bird surveys happen during breeding birds because birds are kind of sticking to one spot. But when they breed in the Arctic, it's hard to count them. And so the spaces that they pass through, Florida and Massachusetts and Canada and Central America, they're there, but they're only there transitory. They pass through. But Brian Harrington, and let me flip over to him. he had this idea back in the 70s, 1974, actually. This is our 50th year. We're celebrating 50 years of ISS, that even though he couldn't like send a scientist to every single spot along the East Coast where that was important to shorebirds, he knew that shorebirds generate this particular enthusiasm a lot because they use the places that we love. And if he could recruit these shorebird enthusiasts to send him data, he could get some ideas about what spaces they were using, how they were moving, what their numbers were doing, all kinds of information about the shorebirds. So he started at Manomet in 1971. He started the International Shorebird Survey, ISS, in 1974. And the way that it started was two things. He reached out to everybody he knew who was a shorebird enthusiast, but also he actually put an advertisement in American Birds, which was basically the birding journal back then. And he said, if any observer is interested in counting shorebirds, send me your data. And he actually had data submitted by 67 shorebird sites in the very first year. And then by 1980, there was only over 100 contributors. So this is the actual cover of the American Birds magazine. And then the inset shows the advertisement that they put out. And 87 people sent them data the first year. I think that's amazing. And so for the first, up until 2008, so for the first 40 years or so, he was receiving hundreds of handwritten field journals from hundreds of contributors across the hemisphere. And you can see an example of one of them on the screen. And in the back room behind my office, right that way, we have a whole wall that is filled with these records. And the interesting part is that there's correspondence with all of these. So Brian was a prolific writer, and he would receive a letter about what's happening in this particular shorebird site, and he would respond, and that would be a correspondence. And there's hundreds of these correspondence in there. So the whole endeavor has been documented, and there's definitely some great stories in there. And I can talk about some of them if I have time. I'm not even sure if I'll get to it, but we're going to keep on going, and we'll see how much time we have at the end. So just some basic points about the International Shorebird Survey. Again, as I mentioned, it was started in 1974, and we focus on migrating shorebirds. So I know, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, there's some really important, vital programs that monitor nesting shorebirds in the United States: piping plovers and snowy plovers and Wilson's plovers, American oyster catcher, willets. And these, because they breed in the United States, they are studied in a slightly different way than some of the migrating shorebirds. So International Shorebird Survey focuses on the migrating shorebirds. And we started moving over from paper to eBird in 2006. We have, in 2023, we had 750 contributors sending in 11,000 surveys across the hemisphere. And as you can see from the map, we really do have volunteers from Alaska all the way down to the southern tip of South America. So we're getting a snapshot along the whole path of these migrating shorebirds. And one of the most important things about ISS is that we transform shorebird enthusiasts into a shorebird conservation constituency, because one of the most important goals is that we give folks who love shorebirds a way that they can make a difference in shorebird conservation. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. as we keep going through the presentation. So how do shorebird scientists and conservation partners use ISS data? Y'all might have heard of the 3 billion birds paper that happened in 2019. It was put out by Cornell and American Bird Conservation and National Audubon. And it was actually the biggest news story, science news story of 2019. We had a quote from Ken Rosenberg, who's the lead author, about how most of the data that paper was based on, the 3 billion birds gone, came from Christmas bird counts and breeding bird surveys. And when we were talking to Ken about, well, did you use ISS data? He sent us this quote that said, without ISS data, we would not have been able to use data for 20 of the migrating shorebird species. So we always are very proud of that contribution to that paper, because it is one of the most important science papers to come out in the last 5 years. And then these are just some examples of local partners, national wildlife refuges, state agencies that use ISS data for their planning purposes, for understanding how the shorebirds use their spaces. And one of the most important things to me is to make sure that anybody who contributes data to ISS knows how valuable it is and how it's used. So I always like sharing this slide. So more recently, we had a paper published in 2023 about shorebirds specifically. So the 3 billion birds, that talked about all the shorebirds that were decreasing, and all the birds that were decreasing. And in 2023, based on ISS data, we took a look at specifically what was happening with the shorebirds. And unfortunately, it's not great news. This graph basically lists out all the shorebirds. You can see willet at the top, red knot at the bottom. And if you think about, can you see my pointer?
Yes.
I don't know if
yeah, we see it.
Okay, so this is kind of an even line. This is the line where if the shorebirds over the last 50 years were staying the same, all of the data would be on this line. But as you can see, it is not. Most of the data is to the left of this line, which is negative. In fact, the red knot, which is most recently put on the endangered species list a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think, that's decreased over 95% over this data is from the last 50 years, basically since 1980 or so. So you can see the trends are not great, but then I always have to show the next slide. The American oyster catcher has bucked the trend. So in 2001, the American Oyster Catcher Working Group was formed because a group of scientists, many of them from Manomet, realized how quickly American oyster catchers were decreasing in numbers. And there was a sense that it was happening to a lot of species, but they really said, okay, let's just focus on the American oyster catcher. So they identified the threats, they had some range-wide monitoring, they figured out some strategies, reduced the disturbance, managed predation, and they've actually shown a 45% increase in population in 15 years. And, you know, it took focus, and unfortunately it takes funding. But that proves that if you push the right levers, if you get the right work done, these shorebird populations can come back. And so I never show the previous slide without showing this slide, because all of this has purpose. The numbers that we collect through the ISS help target the conservation measures that managers and agencies can can bring to bear to help what the shorebirds that we all love, of course. And so this is going back to the paper from last year. This shows where ISS data came from to produce that paper that show those drops, the drops and the red knots and the other shorebirds that I was talking about. And because Manomet is based in Massachusetts, and that's where Brian started his email, or sorry, not back then, not emails, writing all of the shorebird enthusiasts that he knew about. It really started on the East Coast, and then it grew. So you can see there are some spots in the South and in the West. Each spot represents a group of data that the paper was based on. And so, you know, New England and the East Coast and around the Great Lakes and up in Canada is heavily represented. And there definitely are sites in Florida where data contributed to that paper. But one of the reasons why I was really excited when Kathy reached out about presenting to Orange Audubon is because Florida is one of the places that I've always known we need more volunteers, but I haven't created the plan to get them. And so this is kind of the first step to that plan. I'm very excited about it. So we're gonna give Florida a glow up in terms of what kind of data is represented on this map for the next paper. So a little bit about the shorebirds of Florida, because I know there are a lot of folks in Florida who already do a lot of really amazing work with shorebirds. And no wonder, because shorebird really is the linchpin of a number of two different flyways, both the Atlantic and the Mississippi flyway. Birds go straight through Florida. So if you follow the lines of the green, you can see that birds in Florida, they can end up in Alaska. It's amazing. And they've seen that from the flagged birds. So I know the Florida Shorebird Alliance is one of the main groups that does a lot of work with shorebirds. And they have the Florida Shorebird database where all of this work kind of feeds into. They do a lot of nesting bird monitoring, including the rooftop monitoring. They do great work with the flags, the flagged birds, and getting those into the database. They have a winter shorebird survey, which is awesome. They do some migration monitoring, but we really want to talk to folks about really focused on that migratory shorebirds, because that's the kind of shorebirds that are in a steep decline. And sometimes it gets a little not clear about what kind of shorebirds are out there and what kind of shorebirds are passing through Florida. So we wanted to complement all of the amazing work that the Shorebird Alliance, and I just listed a few of the partners, and a lot of them are the various Audubon societies on the slide. But this is definitely kind of a hand-in-hand endeavor. So these are some of Florida's nesting shorebirds. These are some of the birds that the Florida Shorebird Alliance focus on. And then these are some of the migrating shorebirds. So these migrating shorebirds are the ones that ISS are most care about in Florida. And you see red knot is right at the top of the list. This is actually a document put together by our partners and staff in Georgia. The Georgia Bite Shorebird Initiative has been doing a lot of work, and the birds in Georgia are very similar to the birds in Florida. So I stole some of the graphics, so I can show you some of the key shorebird species that ISS cares the most about. And I wanted to show one more map that kind of talks a little bit about what how this shorebird work is in connection with you and where y'all are, where Orange County is. The Florida Shorebird Database is one of the endeavors endeavors of the Florida Shorebird Alliance. And this is the map that they actually have on their website. I just stole it from their website that kind of shows where they're focusing. And you can see a lot of it is on the beaches, which are very important in Florida, obviously. But the right map is a map from eBird that shows where semi-pallimated plovers are in and around Orange County. And you can see there are a lot of spaces. And semi-pallimated plover is one of the species that ISS is interested in. In fact, it's one of the it's one of the highest counts that we have in Massachusetts. And we need to know when they leave Massachusetts, where do they go? So just to jump a little bit into ISS in Florida, this is a recruitment call. I'll be honest, we're looking for folks who can count shorebirds for us anywhere in Florida. If you look at the left map, this is everywhere over the last 50 years that has sent us an ISS checklist, ISS data. The right map is everywhere that we were sent data in 2023. And you see, we have a lot of spaces that we need data from. That's one of the reasons that the map that I showed you earlier that showed a lot of strong color along the East Coast, but not so much in Florida, that's kind of because we've not been focusing enough on Florida recently, the ISS team, and we've lost some of our volunteers. So we're reaching out and we're going to try to replace them. This is a zoom in of the map that shows where ISS has been submitted in Florida. And just going to call out some of the areas that might be near where Orange Audubon is. There has been ISS submitted from, and I'm going to mispronounce it, Lake Apopka, but not much. There's been a lot of ISS submitted from 5-phosphate mines, which, and I have to say, I'm not that familiar with birding in Central Florida. I go to Miami and Southern Florida regularly, and I actually have a birding uncle who lives in Tallahassee. So I know some of those spaces, but I haven't been around Orlando much. So I can't really talk about the shorebirds in the places that you know and love. But that's okay, because you know where the shorebirds are in your areas. And once we figure out where good places for ISS is, we'd love to get any data that anybody cares to send us. For example, a gentleman, I don't know him, I haven't corresponded him, but a gentleman from India Atlantic Beach has sent us over 300 surveys in the last 3 years. So we are getting data from Florida. We just needed some more areas covered. So why? I've told you the need. We need more data from Florida. Why become an ISS contributor? Well, because if you do, you get to look like this guy. Because having shorebird conservation will only happen if we can continually recruit new shorebird enthusiasts. And of course, everybody loves shorebirds, but ISS is a way that you can take that enthusiasm for shorebirds and turn it into conservation action. And that's basically what the whole goal is for community science. And submitting checklists to eBird is a great way to do this. This ISS is just a more targeted for shorebirds endeavor. So that's always what we say. What we say when we say, well, why contribute to ISS? And if you do contribute to ISS, you will hear all about how your data is used through the ISS newsletter. We send it out a couple times a year, and we always talk about what scientific studies are being used We also talk about some of the most important shorebird sites where ISS comes from. We also send out some shorebird ID tips and tricks, but mostly we highlight our volunteers. We talk about volunteers who might be new, volunteers who have done it forever, volunteers from across the hemisphere, and we spend a lot of time celebrating them. So let's say I've convinced you that ISS is something that you'd like to contribute to. Well, how do you do it? The amazing thing is that it's so easy. It uses eBird. So if you contribute to eBird, the step to contributing to ISS is minimal. One of the key things is to start figuring out where you want to send ISS from. And the interesting thing is that we don't tell you where to go. What we want, we know that birders, they know their patches. They know what birds are around. They know how the birds use their spaces and when they come through. So we don't say, okay, we need you to go here and count for this long and send us the data. We just say, if you, as you bird, you know there's a space around you that shorebirds are. If you are interested, you can go there and send us your data. We have a mapping tool that helps you. The only thing that we want to avoid is like two different people counting the same site in different ways. So we do ask that you kind of take a look at the mapping tool. It's on the Manomet's website. You can use the QR code, or you can just Google ISS mapping tool. It'll come up, and you just kind of zoom around and see, okay, no one's going to my patch. And because of the map that I showed earlier, there's not a ton of data right now being submitted for Orange County. So you're probably safe, but it is fun to kind of look through the tool. And you can look at some of the older data and see whether that's something that you can contribute data from a spot that was contributed previously, and that makes the data even more valuable. So once you pick your spot, the protocols are very straightforward. We do ask that you visit your site 3 times in a migration season. So fall, say you're in Florida, so you're going to be a little bit earlier. So maybe say February, March, April, before the nesting season starts, or sorry, that would be spring. And then in fall, you're going to be a little later. So say October, November, December, maybe once a month. 3 times is what we really need to track the motion through time. And that's how our models work. Our models work by looking at the motion through time over many years. So if you do visit a site, we ask that you visit it in the same way. So if you only bird the north part of a lake and you submit ISS data, then you always submit it from just the north part of the lake. Like, you want to visit it, the same site in the same way in about the same amount of time, under the same conditions. So you wouldn't want to go when it's like thunderstorming or something. And then to submit your data, all you do is you use eBird, and instead, under observation type, instead of traveling or stationary or historic, you scroll down that little drop bar and you will see ISS, right there. That's it. That's all you do. If you hit ISS and you hit submit, we will get that data. So all we're doing is we're looking for people who visit places where shorebirds gather already. Because if there's a spot that you like to visit regularly and it has shorebirds there and you're going to visit it, no matter what, that's when we know it'll be easy for you to contribute ISS data. And because our goal is to get the same person to contribute ISS data from the same spot over years, over the season, and then also over years, easy is the most important thing. We want this to be something that is so easy that you do it anyway. You don't have to think about it. You happen to go to this site, you submit an eBird checklist, and you tag it ISS. And then you will do it month after month, you will do it year after year, and we will be able to build up another 50 years worth of data. We do encourage folks to report flags. This is a little graphic that I created for one of our previous newsletters. It's not the focus of ISS, but it's something that's so fun that it gets people also enthusiastic about it. So that's my basic presentation. We also have, like I said, we were celebrating 50 years of ISS, and we have a celebratory t-shirt. If anybody's interested in the ISS t-shirt, you can hit the QR code. And also, if you do start ISS, we are creating in the mapping tool that I showed, we're actually creating a form where you can submit information about your site, like how big is it and what kind of habitats are in your site. And at the next newsletter, we're going to have a contest where we're actually giving away 3 t-shirts. We have 3 extra t-shirts from the last time we ordered a batch. So we're going to pull names out of anybody who's submitted extra information about their site and send them off t-shirts. Very excited about that. So I did go through some of my slides kind of quick, because I wasn't sure what I had on time. If anybody has any questions about anything that I talked about, I'm happy to go back. I'm happy to talk about shorebird identification more, or why is Florida so important for shorebirds, or back to the science that Manomet does in the Arctic or South America. Any of those slides at all, I'd be happy to talk more about. I'm gonna hit my last slide and say thank you very much for letting me come and chat all about ISS to y'all for this hour. Or actually, it wasn't quite that long, but I hope folks are enthusiastic about shorebirds and maybe will send us some data.
Actually, it sounds not that hard. Just make sure
Not
you're
at all.
check to see if somebody's already doing a patch and hit the ISS under the observation type.
It really, back in 1974, when Brian was thinking through, oh, I'm creating this new shorebird enthusiast army to send me data, because this was his research. This was what he wanted to understand. In 1974, folks did not really understand how the shorebirds were using these spaces. And he's like, no one's going to send me data. This sounds really hard. And then he thought about the birders he knew. I mean, birders, they visit their patches. They love their patches and they go regularly. And he was like, if I can get people who visit patches regularly that happen to have shorebirds just to send me their data, that's going to build up this database. And 50 years later, people are still doing it. We had I think it was 750 people send in data last year. And it, when you think about the millions of people who submit eBird, it doesn't sound like that much. But the fact that some folks submit 100 checklists, and when you commit to covering the same space in the same way, so it means that you don't spend half an hour one day and then 5 hours in the next. You do the same routine, but that's how birders bird. Birders often do the same routine. That makes the data so more valuable because it's so less noisy. eBird has these really powerful algorithms to solve the problem of noise. And that's great. And they're brilliant. But if you can just get people to send you data that's less noisy, you can get some really good information out of that.
Oh, I have a quick
really,
question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So we had a pretty good migration at Lake Apopka this past fall. I guess it was more around August. Now that I know, it'd be so easy to do, because so the Lake Apopka North Shore is where there was farmland, and it got very polluted, and so the farmland, that lake is being cleaned up over a very long period of time. And so sometimes the lake level goes up and down and we get mud flats. So we had a really nice mud flat right during migration. It was awesome. Had we known. But next time we can do that. You were talking about your semi-palmated plovers. We had a lot of them this year. So
That's great.
now that we know, we didn't know that there was anything like this. So this is really
Mhm.
exciting.
That's very exciting because that kind of fluctuation, that's information that's meaningful. And looking at that year after year, from the beginning of the season when there are no shorebirds to the middle of the season when there are lots of shorebirds to the end of the season when there are no more shorebirds, and kind of looking at that graph, looking at that little distribution, and then looking at that distribution this year and the next year and the next year and the next year and the next year, that's how you build up the database. So one of the things that I should say is that I mentioned that we asked for a minimum of 3 counts in a shorebird migration season, because that's what the models need as a minimum. But more is better. If someone goes every week or if someone goes every 5 days and does the counting in the same way and hits ISS, the more data, the better. We asked for 3 as a minimum because we don't want to overwhelm people with what we need. And 3 does give us very important information because you can create that graph, that little distribution with 3 points. But more is definitely better.
And
No,
the mapping,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
The mapping tool is used to determine like your location.
You just, as long as you keep the same route each time, that's what is important. And if you on my QR code will take you to the ISS website, and there's a link that goes to the protocol where they talk all about this. But the basic is, we don't tell you where to go. All we say is go to the same place each time. And as long as you're covering the same place each time, whatever the shorebirds are doing, that's what you're recording.
Okay, that's good.
Now, I have a question. Is there, are you only counting certain shorebirds or
All
anything?
shorebirds.
All shorebirds. Okay.
All shorebirds. And we have a flock estimation video. And I know that some of the IDs are hard. I still mess up the dowitchers. The difference between a short-billed dowitcher and long-billed dowitcher is tough. It really is. And so we don't worry too much if you put in dowitcher spa. That's fine. It really is the overall numbers. And if you're looking through a flock of semi-palmated sandpipers and you miss a western or you miss a white rump, we don't care. It's fine, whatever. What we're really interested in is, are there 100 semi-palmated sandpipers this year and 90 next year? Whether there's 1 or 2 oddities in there. It'd be great if you want practice. We put in little ID sheets that talk about the differences between white rumps and semis, and it's fun to learn. But really what we're interested in is the basic composition of all the shorebird flocks. And even if you only have 20, 20 black-bellied plovers, that's a number. If you look at that every year consistently, that's a number that's meaningful to us.
Very good. And we did have a comment from Delcy that said, you are welcome to come visit us at Lake Apopka Wildlife, either at the drive or come to our festival the first week of December. And she had also said, wow, it's too bad we didn't know about this ISS when we had all the shorebirds here, but and she also wanted to know,
There's always
can
next
you
year.
pick up information from eBird or not?
No, it can be a normal eBird checklist that has all of the birds on it. The only thing we ask is that you count every shorebird you can. And within whatever space you have in your head, that's your site. So your site goes from, like my site goes from the beginning of the beach along this route, but I don't go over to where this little marsh is, just because the person who did the site before me didn't, so I don't. And that just keeps the data consistent.
Okay. All right, and I think we answered Debbie's question. So you don't need to do a separate eBird checklist, just put ISS under observation.
Yep, you bird the way that you normally bird. We don't want you to have to think about this. The only thing we say is the same way every time. But the way we want you to do it is the way that most people bird. So that's the goal.
Okay, that actually sounds pretty easy.
Yes,
Very
yes,
good.
we want it to be. Because
Yeah.
you know, it's very difficult to do something continuously over a number of years if it's hard. The barriers are as small as we can possibly make them.
And Bobby said, good talk. Sorry, I don't live in Florida to participate.
We want data from everywhere. If
Yeah,
you're
I was
from
gonna
Europe,
say.
we can't use that data, but there are other shorebird surveys that I could connect you with. But anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, if you live in the Western Hemisphere, I want your data.
There you go. Very good.
Very good. That was so interesting, and that's
That
so
was.
Oh, I'm
exciting
glad to hear that.
that we can contribute, because seeing that map, and Lake Apopka is just a big bird hotspot, and we do get the shorebirds sometimes. And we know some people on the coast that we can send them a copy of the video when we get it and say, hey,
Yeah, hey,
yes,
you
you know.
need to
That's awesome.
be doing
Yeah,
some
Merritt
of that.
Island is going to be
Merritt
a
Island.
place that's not
Merritt
being-
Island has some folks that send us data. So that's the kind of example where you can, I mean, I could actually pull it up.
Mhm.
I'm
on my
thinking
screen.
Joe Overstreet would be a good place.
Yeah,
too.
that's another place.
Yep.
They
that
got a lot of shorebirds there.
So you pull it up and you say, okay, this person's going here, but I can go here. And those are new shorebirds, and that's great for ISS.
Very
Very
cool. Yep.
Nice. Chelsea said we go to Merritt and we go to Joe Overstreet and we use eBird. Oh, there we go. So
Yeah.
you just have to make sure you commit to going 3 times
Three
during
times
each of
a
the
migration season. So either spring or fall. It doesn't have to be both. More is better, but 3 is great.
That's excellent. Oh, we really
Yeah.
appreciate this. And yeah, if you've got your phone, you can capture that QR code, and then you know how to get to their website.
And
Mhm.
and I'm happy to take any emails. The website basically talks through the protocols that I just kind of went through quickly, and it says it more clearly. It says kind of estimated start dates and end dates. But again, we say the birders know their sites. Whenever the shorebirds show up, that's when you start.
Okay, we'll be looking. Hopefully, you know, from year to year out of Lake Apopka, where the mudflats show up changes, but luckily this
Does
year
change.
it was close to the main road where you can
But
walk
if you
in or
do,
travel.
if you keep the same route,
Yep.
it may
If they
change,
happen to
but
not be
that's
there,
okay, right?
if they
Okay.
happen to not be there, or fewer are there, it's still data.
Okay.
So you do the same space and you just count the shorebirds. Whatever is there, that's what we want.
Okay. And
Very
a person could do multiple sites, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I do say that we would rather, like if you said, okay, I happen to have some good times for my birding, for my shorebirds this season, I could probably do 6 ISS counts. We'd rather have 6 from one site than 3 from 2 sites.
Okay.
It is, the curve is what the distribution, the shorebirds, no shorebirds, here come the shorebirds, lots of shorebirds, no shorebirds. understanding that curve is how the models work. And the models, the math, the complex math behind the models that I really don't understand, that's why they can write the papers and really understand what's going on with the shorebirds. So the more times you can visit during that curve, the better the models will be able to interpret the data and create the results of what's actually happening to the shorebirds.
Nice. Very good.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Of
And
course.
Yeah.
we look forward to helping you with this project. I'm sure
Mhm.
some
And
of our members do this.
I hope to reach out to some of the other Audubon chapters. And I'd love to do this. I'd love to focus on Florida some. And I actually come to Florida regularly. I have my folks have a house on the Keys that they spend about 6 weeks down out of the year. So I visit them, and my husband loves Miami, so I'm usually in Florida 2 to 3 weeks out of the year. So
Ah. So you need a T-shirt that says, "Ask me about participating in the International Shorebird
Yes.
Survey."
I
And when
have
you
my- I
go
have
to
a-
the beach or you go
Yep.
anywhere that has mud flats, you're set.
yeah, definitely want to talk to more Florida bird clubs and Audubon chapters for sure.
Yeah, like over there at Fort DeSoto. That's another one.
Yep.
Yeah, they probably have somebody there. 'Cause
Probably.
I think I saw that on your map.
Yep.
The
Well,
St. Pete Fort
The
DeSoto
problem
area.
is that the map might only be one shorebird count.
Oh,
You kind of have to zoom in and say, okay, was it just one person who went one time, or is it someone that's going consistently?
oh, okay. All right.